All right, here for our part three for sharks and fish. We are ready to now program our scoring. In part two, we programmed our fish here so that when we press the flag, he will randomly choose a Y coordinate over here on the left side for each time that he makes his way across the screen. Now we're ready to add the gaming part of this, where the shark is going to be able to eat the fish and score points. So to first start with that, we're going to go over to our stage over here on the far right side, because we're going to use something called a variable. And this variable will apply across the entire game. And the easiest way is to apply it within the stage. Over here on the far left, we're going to click on our variables category. And at the top, you're going to see an option that says make variable. So we click on that, and it will give you an option to name it. We're going to call it score. And you'll notice what happens is on your game board, you'll have a scoring screen, and then you have a new variable here on the left side. Now, if you uncheck that, it disappears from your scoring or from your game board here. So you want to make sure you leave that checked. Now, because that is a score, we want to add a couple of programming codes to it. First thing we're going to do is over here on the left side for our event, we're going to grab our flag so that when our game starts, it's going to do a few things. The first thing it's going to do, if we go down to variables, is we are going to set it to 0, because if somebody else was playing this game previously, presumably they got a score. Now you're ready to play the game, and you want it to set itself back to 0. So we're going to change this to score, and that will make it set to 0 when you start the game. All right, now let's make it so that when you eat the fish, the score goes up. So we're going to click on the fish right down here in the bottom right and bring us to our programming code here. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit. It makes it a little easier to see our code on the recording. And we're going to add an additional if statement within our forever loop. So we're going to go over here to control, find an if-then statement, and snap it right below our previous if statement from part 2. And now what we're going to do is look for a conditional, which will be a sensing conditional. So we're clicking on the light blue, and we want to sense the condition that when we are touching the shark, and mine is called shark 2, so that's the sprite that I'm looking to touch. Now, what happens when we are touching that particular sprite, which is the shark? Because this is in the forever loop, it's going to continuously check this condition. Am I touching the shark? Yes, I am. So now I'm going to do these actions inside. The very first thing I want to do is I want to go to my variable, and I want to change my variable by 1. I'm going to put that inside, and I'm going to change my variable to the score. And what that will do is increase the score by 1 each time it touches the shark. Now, we also want to make it look like it's been eaten. So we're going to go to looks, and we are going to grab the hide icon. So if we scroll down a little bit, you'll see it here. So it changes the score, and then it hides. So if I click start here and give it a try, you can see it works. Now it's been hidden. Now what? All right. We now need it to go back over here to the left. Right. So I'm going to grab this same go to XY, pick random statement like I've done in previous ones. The easiest way is to separate this, right click on it, duplicate it, put it over here to the right, and then re-snap this together. And I just separate that so I can grab just this part of the code. And I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. So now what's going to happen is when it hits the shark, increases the score by 1, it hides, and then it's going to go back over here to the left side. But remember, it's still hidden. So I need to then make it show. All right. And what that will do is now when I click start, it's still hidden from previous. So I'm going to add a show up here to the top. And a lot of times you'll see that as you start making different sprites disappear, you need to remember to add to its sort of starting sequence a positioning which is what this does, and then also a show, so that from the last time it was played, it shows. All right, now let's go ahead and start. You can see every time I grab that fish, it disappears, my score goes up, and it looks a little unnatural, right? The second I eat that fish, it reappears over here on the left side. So what I'm going to do is add a little bit of a wait command in there as well. And if you do that, underneath control over here on the left side, I'm going to have it wait about a second before it actually goes back over here to the left. All right, so I'm going to have it change the score. I'm going to hide, then I'm going to wait about a second, and then I'm going to go back over to the far left and show itself again. Let's see what that looks like. Like that. All right, so that looks a little more playable, looks a little less unnatural. Now, I have a fully functional fish here that when my shark touches it, it eats it, it increases my score, does all those perfect things. So this code works perfectly. And I'll zoom out just a little bit so I can see my full code. And now once I have a sprite that I want to duplicate, I can go over here onto the sprite and right click on it. Now, if you're on a Chromebook, usually that's with 2 fingers on your trackpad. That'll give you a left click or a right click. Sorry, left click. And then that left click will give you a right click will give you a duplicate, right? So I duplicate it. I get a new fish, but I'm going to go to costumes and I'm going to change it to a different costume so it looks like an entirely different fish. Go ahead and duplicate that again. Change the costume to this fish, duplicate it again, change it to this fish. And now I effectively have 4 different fish that are all acting the same, right? Now, it looks a little weird that they're all coming out at the exact same time and that they are all in sequence or in sync with each other. So now what I can go in and do is adjust some of the different things within each of my fish. So let's say I want to make it so that this orange fish is my fastest fish. So I'm going to go back into my code. I'm going to say, you know what? I want him to go 12 steps each time. And because he's a little faster, I'm going to make his score worth 2. This fish, the blue one, I'm going to make him a little slower. So I'm going to make him go 6. But now his score is only worth half, so 0.5. I'm going to make this fish a different speed here. Let's just put him at a 7. And let's make this fish worth at a 6. Now, I'm going to stop this. I'm going to start it. And because they're all at different speeds, that creates a very different look. I can even go down here and change some of the waiting time. So this fish automatically waits 1 second after it's eaten, but maybe the one that's worth more points, that fish waits 3 seconds. So you see him less often. Right? And that's how you have all of your fish for your scoring variables. Now, we want to create one additional sprite here. And this additional sprite is going to be the bad guy, right? It's going to be how you lose points. So what I'm going to do is down here in the bottom right-hand corner, I'm going to click choose a sprite. And this sprite is a crab. Now this crab goes in here. He's obviously way too big, so we're going to change his size back down to maybe 45%. That's a little small. Let's do 50%. And I'm going to move him down here on the sand because that's where the crabs go, right? They don't float in the middle of the sea. So I'm going to move this crab over here on the left side. And I want him to move the same way that the fish do. So I'm going to grab one of my fishes. And unlike when I right-clicked on the fish to duplicate the entire sprite, I just need this code. So what I can do is I can grab this code, and wherever my mouse is, put that on top of the crab. And if you notice, that crab kind of wiggles a little bit, telling you that if you were to drop it right on top of the crab, it'll duplicate itself right into the crab. You don't have to duplicate this code ahead of time. It'll do it automatically when you drop it on top of the crab. And now I have the code that makes the fish move attached to the crab. but I want the crab to act a little bit different. So I'm going to, again, reposition my crab over here. And I'm going to see what his XY coordinates are. His X coordinate is 195. His Y coordinate is 74. So I'm going to go inside my XY coordinates. And I'm going to change these to what works for the crab. So 195 is close to 206, but I can change it to be exactly what I want it to be. And I'm going to now pick a different random range. Instead of 140 to 78, which is basically the entire screen, I want him to just stay down here. So at the highest, I want his Y coordinate to be negative 72. And at his lowest, I want it to be negative 164. So let's change this to 164. This one to negative 72. That will keep him within just these areas for when he starts. I'm going to make those same changes to all of his XY coordinates. This one is when he touches the edge. And this one is for when he touches the shark. All right, now I'm going to stop it and restart it and see if that works. That should keep it so that the crab is only ever down here on the bottom, right? That random and negative 72 to negative 162 keeps him within the Y coordinates down here on the bottom half of the screen. The other thing I want him to do is I want him to lose points when he touches the crab or touches the fish because he's the bad guy. So I'm going to make it so he loses 6 points every time the fish touches the crab. Maybe I also want to increase the speed. I want him to be a little bit more menacing. And then I'm going to also make it so that he waits a random amount when he once it gets eaten, right? Rather than 1 second, let's maybe go down to our operators and let's pick something random so that he is either anywhere from 0 seconds to 4 seconds later, maybe 3 seconds. 4 is kind of a long time. And now that way, if I accidentally eat him, whoop, I don't know when he's going to reappear. Could be anywhere from 1 second later to 0 seconds later. That was 0 seconds. If you look at my score, I'm down in the negatives because I've touched that crab so many times. And that's how you add a bad guy to your scoring criteria within this variable and affects it differently. Now you're ready to move on to part 4.